HellRaiser 2022 is about what if HellRaiser 1987, but more complicated and much, much longer. What if that again, except everyone had 2 or 3 more motivations, but somehow was still a shallower character? What happens when you take a pretty good movie and glue a bunch of gubbins to it? Just cram it full of stuff it doesn't need for no reason. What do you think happens? Hello, scaredy cats.
I have such sights to show you.
Did you like that? Did you like that I quoted HellRaiser 1987 just now? Did you nod along thinking to yourself, I recognize that line? Then you may be in the correct headspace to watch HellRaiser 2022. Because boy, it likes to remind you of the cool stuff that already happened in the previous, better version of this movie. I'm making an effort not to be negative on this channel. I want to celebrate horror, not just bag on bad movies for cheap laughs, because making even a bad movie is a huge accomplishment. And I think sometimes I can lose sight of that. And Hellraiser 2022 is by no means a bad movie, but the bad things about it are just way more interesting than the good things about it. An evil billionaire, but I repeat myself, is obsessed with the power and temptation of the Cenobites, and he sets into motion a series of events which result in a bunch of people being mutilated. If you're not familiar with the Hellraiser franchise, a Cenobite is, okay, so their thing, right, the thing about the Cenobites is they want to show people the limits of experience. They view pain and pleasure as synonymous, and they want to give people the gift of the most extreme sensations possible. They don't distinguish between whether it's torture or bliss, right? That's why they're often referred to as angels to some, demons to others. Because if you're into weird pain stuff, you might like hanging out with them. That might be tight and sick for you. And even if you're not, they might break your brain so bad with all the pain stuff that you might come to enjoy it. Who knows? They're like they're extreme S&M torture demons, essentially, more or less. Nominally, they are summoned from hell, which sometimes is, but usually is not literal hell, when a human opens a magic puzzle box called the Le Marchand configuration, or Lament configuration, as it's usually called. They are led by the iconic Hell Priest. What a curveball. I bet you thought I was going to call this character Pinhead. Series creator Clive Barker definitely does not want you to call this character Pinhead, but that's who this is. Come on, Clive. That name is stuck at this point. Have a sense of humor. And that's really all you need to know going into this new movie. And the movie will expect you to know that much. It does sort of explain it in a very perfunctory way halfway through. It's just that when it does, it's super boring and they rush through it as fast as possible. So I think it's kind of taking it for granted that you already know all of this. There are a lot of reveals in the movie that are supposed to be meaningful, but will only work if you're familiar with that lore. The fun of this movie is seeing how the mythology of the originals has been remixed and changed. In the 2022 lore, the Le Marchand configuration, here not named, has 7 discrete forms which correspond to 7 categories of desire. Each time it is solved, basically anytime someone touches it, it's not a difficult puzzle, it stabs the person holding it, marking them for retrieval by those dastardly Cenobites. Upon the 7th sacrifice, you can appeal to the god of the Cenobites, Leviathan, for a gift of one of those categories, but mostly they'll torture you, so probably don't, would be my advice. I'm of 2 minds about this change. I think it complicates the pretty simple and appealing mythology the series had operated under to this point, that the box wasn't so much seeking out victims, but offering a gift to people that maybe didn't understand what they were getting themselves into. That it kind of seduced people, playing on desire and curiosity, and ensnared them by offering new experiences, only for those experiences to, of course, turn out to be horrible, eternal torture. Not out of malice, necessarily, but because the inscrutable cosmic beings it summons don't see a difference between pain and pleasure. They see torture as like a nice thing they can do for a pal. And that's much scarier to me, because there's no way to appeal to them in that case. They view it as a kindness to torture you, as something you'll want as a gift. You can't really bargain with them or talk your way out of it because they see things in such a fundamentally different way than you. And that kind of doesn't seem like the case whenever they're actively seeking out new people to do hook and chain stuff at. On the other hand, the 7 victims thing does introduce a sort of ticking clock element to the movie that ups the stakes. Each time someone dies, you know the characters are closer to the eventual choice of what, if anything, to ask Leviathan for, and what will happen to them as a result. If there are sequels, though, I imagine they'll probably write this element out, because I can't see it being interesting a second time, but it does mostly work here. The other big change, the one that caused more of a stir despite not mattering whatsoever, the one you probably clicked on this video to hear me talk about, was that they made Pinhead a woman! Or, you know, a girl demon instead of a boy demon. A lot of people got very upset about this, and I guess they were mad because it was woke or something. But like, okay, is it? The Cenobites have always been portrayed as seductive. They pull you in with a sort of sexual desire, so changing their leader from a man to a woman strikes me as a lateral move, wokeness-wise. Not everything needs to be culture war bullshit. Sometimes characters in movies are women. So, I don't know, what's your problem? I think the new Pinhead is fun. I liked her a lot. She has a great spooky voice. She has a very cold menace to her. I love her design with a little choker made out of carved up neck skin. That's neat. She is a little held back by the fact that most of her big moments involve her saying cool lines that the Doug Bradley Pinhead already said in the first better movie.
We have such sights to show you.
Oh yes. We have such sights to show you.
Who are you?
Explorers in the further regions of experience. Demons to some, angels to others.
What are you?
Explorers in the further regions of experience.
She gets one really cool scene where she talks about how the eternal pleasure of heaven is like a single note being played forever. And it's only through changing notes that music can be made. And to illustrate her point, she drives one of her head pins into a woman's vocal cords and plays them like a fiddle. And that's the most HellRaiser shit I've ever seen. Holy shit, that rules. More of that, please. Most of the other Cenobites I could take or leave. They don't look as gruesome as the originals, like nothing about them reads as a human body that has been horribly mutilated to me. I don't know if I can explain why, they just look too anodyne and kind of too pretty for my tastes. I do not feel disgusted or disturbed by them. They're just kind of over-designed and look way too chopped up to be alive, which takes away from the vibe for me, like they don't look like they're experiencing pain. I can see how maybe that might have worked better in concept art than it ended up looking on screen, and I think it's going to work for a lot of people, but it's not my cup of tea. The Cenobites spend most of the movie just scooping people up and tearing them apart with hooks and or chains. Not a thing I'd like to happen to me, but hardly in keeping with their ethos of pain being an art form to be explored. They're not supposed to just kill you. They're supposed to kill you in the most horrific way imaginable so that you experience the heights of sensation. Killing isn't their thing. Killing is just a byproduct of the torture they like. And there's some of that, don't get me wrong, it's just such a long movie, and so much of the movie does not involve people getting gruesomely tortured by S&M demons, and is instead people just arguing constantly. Everyone is always mad at everyone else and always yelling. Nobody stops to listen to anyone else's perspective ever. They all just yell what they think and then storm off to the next scene. And no conflict is ever resolved, no consensus is ever reached, it's just endless perpetual conflict. Thematically, the movie is also very confused. I get the feeling that there was an earlier draft somewhere that dealt more with the idea of being unable to live with guilt, because at the end, that just kind of becomes what the character needs to learn. A thing that would have been very easy to seed into the movie, as she's a recovering drug addict, the exact type of person who would struggle with guilt over past behavior, and who would specifically need to accept responsibility in order to move on. Except the character never really seems to feel all that guilty. Instead, her arc seems to be about overcoming stigma and proving to everyone she can be a dependable person. Until the end, when now it's about how she has to accept responsibility for the pain she has caused others in order to save the day. Here, though, that pain is just shit the Cenobites did. Like, she didn't really have a say in it. She mostly tried to stop it. Aside from a strained relationship with her brother, we don't really get any indication of what kind of pain she has caused people in her troubled past, so this doesn't really amount to anything, which is a big problem, because, as I said, this movie is so long. It's so long. I'm gonna be honest with you. I fell asleep at one point, and I checked on Wikipedia. I was like, do I have to go back and see what I missed? And somehow, despite falling asleep for what felt like half an hour, I saw everything in the movie, like everything that was described in the Wikipedia article, I saw. So how is there a half an hour that I could sleep through without missing anything that happens in the movie? And given the 2-hour runtime and the fact that the story doesn't mean anything, it kind of feels like it's deliberately wasting my time. It's just making every scene slightly longer than it needs to be just to see if I'll keep watching in case a chatterer shows up. And let's not beat around the bush, there is absolutely a chatterer in this movie. This movie is based in Chatterpilled. Not a very good chatterer, but there's a chatterer, and that's more than most movies have, so I do have to give it some points for that. I don't mean to sound harsh, because overall I think this movie is pretty good. It's fine. The things that are good about it are just, exactly what you'd expect. There's not a lot to say about the things that are good about it. Cool monster effects, lots of vaguely horny energy, horrific gore. It just doesn't add much to the formula, and what it does add mostly doesn't work. But, it's still decent enough. It still feels like you're watching a HellRaiser movie, which is more than I can say for most HellRaiser movies. This one is at least a real movie that was made a HellRaiser movie on purpose. Not just like a completely unrelated script that the studio threw Pinhead in at the last minute. And if you're wondering why it took me so long to get to this one, I had planned to do it earlier. I had planned to lead into it with my Midnight Meat Train video, because both are based on the works of Clive Barker. But I was also, at the same time, reading his novel, The Scarlet Gospels, which is it's a story about Pinhead going around doing his stuff, and boy, did that sap a lot of my enthusiasm for the HellRaiser franchise. I get the feeling from that book that even Clive Barker fundamentally no longer understands what makes the Cenobites appealing as characters. He doesn't write them as inscrutable, extra-dimensional beings whose desires exceed the limit of human understanding. They're just evil guys that do evil stuff on account of being demons or some shit. The bulk of the book takes place in literal Christian hell, which is like a cartoon version of hell, and Pinhead has this decades-long plan where he outsmarts everyone, and he kills a bunch of demons, and it's this master plan. The Scarlet Gospels in question are about like him keeping a record of this moment, because people are going to look back on it as important as the Bible. And so his plan, it turns out, spoilers if you haven't read the Scarlet Gospels, but don't, is that he wants to meet the devil. That's it. What happens when he meets the devil? It's not clear. He wants to be his friend or something. It's work for him. They don't get along when they do meet, but that's what it's about. It made me wonder if I just imagined a better version of the characters this whole time. Like, maybe they were never actually explorers in the further regions of experience. Maybe they were cackling villains this whole time. It's just like, why does this franchise run so much from its own premise? HellRaiser 2022 seems to mostly get it right. Mostly. I mean, they do seem to randomly kill people, but at least they seem to do it for the reasons you'd expect from them. That they like doing tortures. I don't know. It gets closer than most appearances of these characters, I guess, and my expectations for this franchise are not super high at this point. So take this all with a grain of salt. Should you watch HellRaiser 2022? If you're champing at the bit for some more Cenobites, sure. I don't think anyone can reasonably suggest that it's one of the worst HellRaiser movies. I think by default you have to agree that it's one of the better ones. I think you could make a very good movie from it if you just didn't have as much of it. If you took a lot of what happens in the movie out of it, I think it would be better. It would be much better. It does at the end give you the origin story for Uncle Fester. So that's something. Have you ever wondered where Uncle Fester came from? Special thanks to my scaredy sweeties over at patreon.com/scaredycats. I'd like to thank in particular James Garford, Devin Kaler, Spooky Heather Sylvia, Eleanor Harvey, Danwich Games, and definitely Todd. And hello, I'm Bobby Duke, star of the channel. I'd also like to thank some other stars of the channel, like Jay Tawny, Schadenfraulein, Langston Tyne, Sirius Bengal, Rowan Everly, Caitlin Moore, Carpad, Josh Manes, Trevor Collins, Hyla Tracy, Louisa Prito, and Jesse. Hey, why don't you go ahead and slash that like button for us, why don't you? And subscribe for more horror content over here on Scaredy Cats. I love each and every one of you personally. But don't go having one of them paranormal relationships with me.